Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, Brandon Royval defeats Tatsuya Taira, fight of the year. Let's discuss. The UFC books 2 title fights for UFC 310 in Las Vegas. December 7th can't come soon enough. And the baddest man and woman could be decided on the planet, obviously, could be decided this Saturday at PFL. Don't chuckle. They have a strong argument. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. And look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's the creator of SBC. He's the reason we're here every Monday. Danny Segura, host of Hablemos MMA. He's taking a big role in SBC. So if you've seen a spike up in the production of the show, it's on him. He's done a great job. He's an outstanding reporter down in Miami. And coming over from the editorial side, he wants to knock some heads around. He loves doing this. Matt Wells, he's in the Big D, Dallas, Texas. Kamikaze on the other side of the pond doing the ones and twos. Let's get going, fellas. Boys, this one was one for the ages. Flyweights are so much fun to watch. They don't get the respect they should. But, man, that top dozen or so of the 125ers, the best 125ers in the world, it's awesome. Danny, lead things off this week, man. What was your reaction to that nice main event that we had on Saturday between Brandon Royval and Tatsuya Taira?
It was a fantastic fight. It was one of the best fights of the year, and it was a card that wasn't all that great. So, like, it really had an amazing ending. And some of these Apex cards, I feel like, we get a little down about them because maybe they're not as stacked and the matchups are not as exciting. But it kind of reminds you that at any given night, you can really witness some awesome shit. And that's what it was for this UFC Fight Night 244 card. It was a card that didn't have a whole lot of expectations. It was kind of like, all right, what did the main event really mean all that much in terms of like being on paper? And then, we really saw one of the best fights of the year. So, I guess don't judge an Apex card by its cover, but fantastic card or fantastic fight. And it was a good time.
Goes, what did you think?
I think this is one of the best. The host has muted your mic. The host is not like
You're good.
me.
You're good.
What? If I wanted to introduce somebody to our sport, somebody that's never watched MMA, I would probably point them in the direction of this fight. I honestly thought it was one of the best flyweight fights I've ever seen. Both guys had moments on the feet. They had moments on the ground. There were moments where you just felt like this is the end. Anything can happen here. This fight's going to be over, and the other guy would just turn it around. You got to give props to their corners, right? I mean, this was war. The adjustments that were made on both sides, coaching-wise, were fantastic. This was just all around such a good fight. And considering what you have to deal with on the other side of the sports world, right, with college football, with the MLB playoffs going on, shout out there. There's just so much to compete with. So to get people's attention is very difficult right now in mixed martial arts, especially when it's an Apex card. But these guys showed up and they made people turn those things off and watch MMA. So proud of both of them. I thought it was just, honestly, for sure, for me, fight of the year, maybe even one of the best flyweight fights I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and it broke my heart to see Tatsuya Taira take that first loss, man. He looked so disappointed. Matt Wells, how about you, man? What did you think of this scrap?
Man, it was a fantastic fight. You got to see the ebbs and flows, the pros and cons of both fighters, right? It started out in the first couple of rounds as simply like that clash of styles, right? The striker versus grappler. But then as the fight went on, we saw, Brandon Royval said, hey, I got something for you on the ground too. So I like to see those adjustments, and I like to see that the fight really kept you on the edge of your seat the entire time, because it was just that constant back and forth. And I really look like one of my favorite things about not only Brandon Royval, but I guess in this matchup was that his ability to just go out there when he was on his feet and just snap that jab off. His boxing is so crisp. He's such an entertaining fighter to watch, man. And he's so game for wherever the fight goes, right? And I think you'll see Tatsuya Taira on this loss here, even though it was a very close fight. I think we'll see him learn a lot from this fight and what he can do and how he can implement a little bit more aggression in certain spots. I think he had some big moments on the ground that he could have done a little bit more with, especially when it comes to adding some more ground and pound to his mix, because he was focusing a little bit too much on control, I think, at times. But I think he'll learn a lot from this fight and he'll be just fine. But man, that was an incredible fight.
Yeah, and I noticed nobody really questioned the scoring, and I also looked at MMA decisions, and it looked like it was pretty unanimous there. Although one judge, I believe it was Sal D'Amato, did score for Tatsuro Taira. Social media didn't seem to imply that there was much of a problem with the decision, so that's good. But Danny, I'm going to go back to you. Stranger things have happened, and I know we're going to get to Kaya Sakura getting the next title shot versus Alexander Pantoja, but did Royval do enough where he can maybe just chill and get the winner of that fight?
For now, yes, for now. But let's wait and see what happens in November when Brandon Moreno returns to fight Amir Albasi, someone who is a fresh face to Alexandre Pantoja, but this could very well not mean anything if Pantoja loses. But yeah, that fight has a lot of weight. Brandon Moreno is one of the most I would actually say he's the biggest star of the UFC flyweight division right now. We know that he's a very important player for the Mexican market, and he's a damn good fighter as well. Every loss that he's had in recent years, it's been super close. It's really been a split decision. The guy's never been finished or really ran over. And then Amir Abbasi, again, as I mentioned, is a fresh face and a guy that also promises to be very talented and could be a future champion in the division. So I would say that for now he is the front runner, but like that could very well change depending on how things shake out with Moreno and Albasi and that result. And as well, we got to see what happens in the main event of or co-main event of UFC 210, right? I think if Pantoja wins, like, do we really want to see a third fight with Royval, especially that they just fought last December? Like, it's kind of difficult. So he's definitely in a good spot, but I wouldn't say that he secured the title shot.
Timetable,
right.
George. The timetable is awful for Brandon Royval. Like what he's done, I think he does deserve it. But like Danny said, where he's stuck right now, so much has to play out, and depending on what happens and what, he's in no man's land, dude. I feel like he's probably gonna end up having to take one more. It just sucks. And Crisco Wild here in our chat says, if we see Amir Albazi beat Brandon Moreno, I'd let Albazi skip over Royval, and I probably can't disagree with that. The sport is so much about what have you done for me lately, and the timetable that Royval's on, and the amount of time he's gonna have to sit. It's gonna be hard, man. It's an uphill climb.
Hey, but Goes, isn't this like something that we've really been asking for a long time in the flyweight division? Like it's always been like super top heavy, where it's just like, I mean, literally the champion and like maybe one contender, and then after that, oh, I've already beaten everybody else. Now we have like so many different options at play. Like it seems like it's almost a first for the division in the UFC, to be honest with you, that we have so many options that we can go with. It's actually pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
Goes, what would you do with Tatsuya Taira now that he's experienced his first loss? He's now 16-1. He looked demoralized, but the dude's only 24 as well.
Yeah, it's so weird with the sport because sometimes you have to look at it as a sport, and then sometimes you look at it from the UFC's eyes, right, as a business. I feel like they love Taira. I think it's a guy that they can get behind. It seemed like the fans really love them. The highlights of this fight, I think, will serve him well. It doesn't so much feel like a loss just because of how well he competed. I would say probably give him maybe a guy like Steve Erceg, a fight that is just going to be all over the place again, a winnable fight, and then he's right back in the mix. But like Matt said, what is the mix? Everybody's fighting for the spot, and everybody is showing different moments of brilliance. So it's really tough. But if you're going to take a loss, I think this is the type of loss you want to take. I think he's going to learn a lot from it and turn things around.
All right, Matt, let's close up with this one. How much hype did he lose? I mean, I don't think anyone thought he was overhyped, but again, it's a shallow division and it was a great fight, so I don't think too much steam comes off.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he's still going to be in a good spot, but we are in, like I said a second ago, we are in the spot right now where like there's so many names vying for that title shot, and he's just going to be a little bit outside of that mix right now, so it does knock him down a little bit. But hype wise, I think like look who he fought against. He fought against a guy who was very dynamic in that he's very, very speedy with his jab on the feet. There's not too many guys like that in that flyweight division that can do that to Taira, I don't believe. So I still think he's in a good spot. It just came down to a very tough matchup against Royval, and Royval's obviously very hungry to get that title shot. I think it bodes well for Royval, that he's so spicy on the mic, so to speak, right? So he's going to be that guy that he might be on the outside looking in, just kind of like Tyra, for a couple of fights here. But, he's going to be able to back it up on the mic at least. Tyra, though, I think he's going to be fine. One or two more fights, and then his name is going to be right back in that mix for a title shot as well.
I think if he's spicy on the mic, Grant Dawson's got to be like a Carolina Reaper or something, right? Give that guy a mic. Jesus.
All right, if we have some time, we'll circle back to see any other highlights from that card, but we want to keep the show moving. And like Ghost said, he picked a comment off the chat. You're more than welcome to chime in with your questions, comments. I try and get the best ones on the show. So, if you want to play around or whatever, that's not too likely to get on. But if you're serious, if you're a serious MMA fan, this is a serious show, then and a fun show, mix it up. All right, guys. So listen, the UFC has these 40 shows per year, right? Across the 52 weeks on the calendar, and a lot of them get buried in the shuffle. And so because of that, I always notice that we have to turn on the Jets on fight week and just all of a sudden get excited that the countdown shows, they rarely get any love from my circles. No one really talks about it. Even the embedded, some people don't even watch them all. I caught number 3 and 6, and so who knows? Now we got this virtual face-off between Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway, a good solid 2 weeks before the event, and it's gotten a little bit of buzz, right? So with the UFC going back, to an old school, an old reliable in the combat sports world of the face-off, what are your guys' thoughts? Did you like them, and who won? We'll go back to Danny Segura to lead off.
I liked it. I think the UFC needs to do more of these, and even just go back to what they used to do and do them in person. I don't know why my algorithm on Instagram has been throwing me some old Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo clips from that world tour that they did. They need to do more of that. And again, I understand, as you mentioned, Gigi, that there's tons of shows nowadays, and it's really hard to get some promotional muscle just because they have so many things to promote. But at least for their pay-per-view events, which are 13 a year, 12 a year, whatever the number is, I would like to see a little bit more emphasis. And this was great. We saw some sides from both Holloway and Topuria that we haven't seen before. I think this rivalry is heating up a little bit, and it got me excited. Certainly there's mutual respect, but there's also a certain level of dislike for each other, perhaps. And that's something we haven't really seen Holloway in a while, right? Like, Holloway's usually a pretty laid back dude. He gets along with everyone. Everyone respects him, a legend. You don't really see much trash talk just because, whoever he's fighting is always super respectful towards him. But finally, we get somebody to kind of poke at him a little bit, and we're getting a little bit of a different side of Holloway, which I've been enjoying. So I'm all in for this. If I had to give a score, I'm gonna go with Ilia here. I think he got the better of some of those exchanges. I really do think he pissed off Holloway with the BMF belt. I think he got what he wanted, right? Which was get some emotion out of Holloway. So yeah, I'm all for these. I think the UFC should do more, and hopefully that's the case in the future.
Matt, do you agree? 10-9 for Topuria, or did you go the other way?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, it was fun. It was a good back and forth banner. Like Danny said, I do like these sort of virtual face-off things. I wish they do, go down this road in the future. But as long as it works for the guys that are involved, the guys and gals that may be involved, if they're gonna get into the back and forth trash talk, then yeah, definitely do these. If it's gonna be kind of a thing where both people are super respectful, then we can do without. But it works here. And I liked a few things that Topuria did. He was trying to get under Max's skin with some of the words that he was saying, brought out the BMF belt, but Max had some good lines as well, even though they were a little subtle. The donuts and churros line, I think went over a lot of people's heads. Donuts representing the 0, the 1 being the one lost in the shape of a churro thing. Yeah. It kind of went over my head at first, to be honest with you, but yeah, I think it was very cool, and I do want to see these more often.
Well, it went over my head too. I thought I had to do something with Mexican policemen or something. But anyway, Ghost, how about you? How'd you score it?
I don't think a donut or churros ever made it past my head, bro. I love those things. Look, I thought Topuria won. I love when they do these things, except I'm kind of with Danny. I think Danny was the one that said this. Try and do them in person. When you have two people in different locations, the streaming era, the delay, it's a little bit rougher to watch. I like when they have two stools, or in boxing they'll It almost looks like they have him in that police room where they're asking him questions. I like that a little better, but I would rather them do this than nothing. But I felt like Topuria got under Max's skin a little bit. Max was, I don't know that this is really his thing, that environment, that type, because he just seemed annoyed that he would even be asked any of these types of questions, which doesn't make much sense considering what you're doing. You have to know that these things are going to come up. But overall, I would rather them do this than not do it. I think they should do it. Like Matt said, as long as the two fighters involved are going to have something to say, do it every time. I mean, there's fights every weekend. There's so many reasons for us to forget what's going on with all these cards. You have to give us reasons to want to watch, and this does that, especially with the more casual fan.
Yeah, I liked it as well, and I think you guys are right. 10-9 Topuria, because he's standing behind, hey, I'm undefeated and I'm the current champ. But I did like the line of Holloway, hey, you're a fan of me. Kind of like, I barely know who you are, whereas you're a fan of me. You sat on your couch on Saturdays and cheered for me. And I also liked the appearance of Holloway, just had kind of like, what am I doing here? I just had the most epic KO of the year. I am the BMF. I'm a former champ with title defense. I'm in the Hall of Fame. I'm cemented. I'm hooking you up, by even being here. He kind of had a little bit of that vibe. So I thought it was a close 10-9. I was hoping one of you guys would maybe see it that way, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I thought it was cool. And okay, and I think we all agree in person's probably the best. And usually for these pay-per-views, don't they fly out the fighters when they announce a ticket sale? So I'm sure at some point, have Topuria and Holloway been in the Middle East together? Because that's where I would have done it. Now, if they didn't travel to get there to do it, then I get it. But I remember Duplessis and Adesanya did promotion in Australia, and then they flew home, and then they flew back to the event. That's what I would love to see, and see it in person. All right, here's another one. I'm going to throw a curveball at you guys here. Did you guys like Fitzgerald in the role? And if you didn't, would you give him a pass to at least try it in person? Because he's kind of a quiet, stoic guy, a professional. But sometimes I feel like a DC, a Bisping, a Dan Hardy, somebody can be there to amp things up a little bit and poke, Goes, you go first.
Well, I think situations like this, you definitely want to have your questions all scripted out, right? And I love that he was able to pick up on the BMF belt and alter that. I thought he did a good job in that sense, but it's just so difficult, man, with the delay and guys talking over each other. I would say give him a pass and let him do it in person, but I didn't think he was so bad.
How about you, Matt?
I think he did a good job because he wasn't reacting. Like when Topuria started getting animated, like he didn't react. He stayed in his lane, and then he would just throw it back to Max. I think he did a really good job moderating it.
Danny?
Yeah, Sam, I think he did a good job, but I think you also bring a great point. I think getting like a DC in there, somebody that will probably go like, ooh, once a diss is thrown or something in there, that could definitely, spice things up a bit. But yeah, it was a good job. And all in all, I really enjoyed that segment.
Yeah, I hope they do more of it. And like I said, look, years ago, UFC 24, right? From 24 to 25 was like 2 months, and you could zero in on every angle, every matchup. You could break it down with your friends. Like there was this whole big lead up, and now it's like, it's over, and it's like, okay, the next week, and it's, and then all of a sudden you just have to get out of that, mind frame and focus on the new set. So I like that this jarred things up a little bit, and hopefully we see some more of it. Any highlights from the 20 minutes, Danny, that stood out to you that maybe others didn't pick up on that you liked?
I thought a couple things were hilarious. That Max was making fun of Ilia's drill where he hits the mitts, and Ilia thought he was saying Joe. So he said, "Who's Joe?" And it was just like a really, really funny moment. It was something from like The Office or something. It was really hilarious. And another, which I think that this was a big deciding factor for me, the fact that like Max was kind of making fun of like, Ilias Topuria's English not being all that great, but it's like the guy just called him out. Dude, this is like my fourth language. What are you talking about? Like, you want to do this in Spanish? Because, we can do that if you want. I thought that was a great comeback from him. Yeah, those are two things that stood out for me.
How about you, Matt? Anything else that stood out to you from the 20 minutes?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from this whole thing was the fact that Topuria challenged Max Holloway to a Justin Gaethje-like, standoff in the middle of the cage. So let's meet in the middle and throw down. And he was like, I guarantee you, like, you're going to sleep if you do that. So I thought that was probably like the spiciest moment of the whole thing. Because as you were talking about earlier, you mentioned that fight, that Gaethje fight. I mean, could you imagine like if that actually happens between Topuria and Holloway? I mean, goodness
There's a
gracious,
bit of a
man.
gentleman's bet right there, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a lot more than just winning the belt, but like okay, like live up to your word. They're saying a lot of things now, so yeah, that'd be very interesting if they were to do this and throw it down. Oof, fireworks.
Mm-hmm. Goes, what do you think of Diego Lopez as the backup fighter? He's been announced for this fight, the alternate, in case one of them were to have an issue with their health or making weight.
I like it. I think it makes sense. It's probably going to be the easiest payday of all time because considering these two guys, like I don't think there's very much that can keep them out of this fight. They both tend to show up and they seem like they both really want this fight. So Diego Lopez can probably chill and just make some money. But overall, I think it's the right choice.
Yeah, I feel bad for like a Mozart Evloev who's undefeated overall, undefeated in the UFC, and
Mm.
they just leapfrogged over him. So that's a message. He better be exciting against Aljamain Sterling because the UFC is being a lot more clear in their messaging as far as like what we're looking for. Danny, you got an early prediction for me on this fight?
I'm going with Topuria. I'm going with Topuria on this one, but boy, this is a tough fight. I do think that Holloway, he's a bit up there in age. He does have a lot of mileage, and his last fight was at 155. I do wonder what that return to 145 looks like. I feel like the last few fights we saw him in the weight class, he looked pretty drained. He looked like he struggled a bit. So I wonder if one trip to 155 kind of could have spoiled that return back. So I'm gonna go with Topuria here, but dude, your guess is as good as mine. This is a very close fight.
Well, you did clarify, but I wouldn't say he's up there in age. I could have sworn he's still like 31 or 32, but he is up there in mileage, and I think that's
Yeah,
what.
well, I think he's like 33 now.
Oh, is he now?
I may be mistaken, but let me pull that up on Google. See,
All right. While you do that, Matt, give me your prediction.
Man, it's hard for me to bet against or pick against Holloway. It's super hard. I think his range is going to be a big factor in this fight. I mean, obviously Topuria is going to bring the power and the aggression, but I think Max is just really really sharp. He's really slick. I could see a fight where he ends up just leaning behind that jab and sticking and moving, and really just picking him apart for the course of 5 rounds if it goes a distance.
Holloway, by the way, 32, turning 33 in December. Topuria just 27, man. He's in the very prime of his career.
Prime. Goes. Who do you lean towards?
Right now, I'm leaning towards Holloway for a lot of the reasons that these guys pointed out. The range, I think, is a big deal. A lot of Topuria's damage is done on the inside. If he can get in the inside, kind of like Volkanovski did, if he follows that game plan, I could see him doing it. But the thing is, can he do it over 5 rounds? I don't know. I think there's too many question marks still. So I'm kind of leaning towards Holloway. But towards the end, I have a feeling I'm going to be penciling Topuria.
We're covering the stand-up appeal of this fight, right? But man, Topuria is a really good grappler too.
Yes.
Now the thing is, can he get it there? So Holloway's not the easiest guy to take down nor keep down. And again, the mind games I think is going to center around BMF. You see a belt, you see them talking about the gentleman's agreement, and that I do lean towards a little bit from Holloway. But we still got 2 weeks. Topuria is not an idiot either, so we'll see. A fight's a fight, and the main thing is to get your hand raised and move on, right? It's not like I don't think you lose any bravado by not just electing to stand, but we'll see. I think my heart's with Holloway on this one. All right, guys, the fight announcements. Let's talk about those. The UFC had some big plans to reveal for the end of the year pay-per-view. Top to the bottom, the card was actually filling out really nicely. We just didn't know how big of a bang, right, we would have at the top. We were waiting for it. Well, we have 2 title fights, and though the biggest names in the promotion aren't involved, everyone I've spoken to is pleasantly pleased. But to be fair, McGregor's semi-retired. Jones fights the night before, or the month before. Pereira just fought, and he does need a break. Makhachev was hurt. O'Malley just lost. So, these are some of the biggest names that are just available. So it's Bilal Muhammad defending his welterweight title against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and Alexander Pantoja is defending his UFC flyweight title against Kai Asakura, who comes over from Ryzen. So let's get a reaction from there. Was Muhammad Rakhmonov the right fight to make?
Yeah, I think it's the right fight to make, but boy, does it kind of show like they're throwing the kitchen sink at this guy. And I feel like, let's just say he gets past this fight it ain't getting any easier. Bilal Muhammad, his title reign, whatever it is he thinks he's going to accomplish, he's going to have to go through some killers. But I do love this matchup. I think it's going to be a really, really fun fight. I actually think this is even harder to predict than the last fight. Bilal Muhammad, with so many improvements in his game, and Shavkat is just so quick, man. He's so good. He feels like he's the future of how fighters are going to be looking. I think it's the right move, and I think it's going to be a great fight.
You like it, Danny? Was that the right pairing?
Yeah, I love it. This fight I've been calling for a while now. There was a lot of contenders there. If they would have gone with an Ian Gary, well, Jack Della Maddalena is injured, but let's say he was healthy and they would have gone with him or Sean Brady. Those guys all deserve it as well. But I think the most deserving guy, and honestly, the most interesting challenge right now, it is Shavkat Rakhmonov. So I think this is a home run. I think this is a hardcore fight. I don't think it'll do crazy numbers like a McGregor, like a Jones fight. But boy, like if you are a fan of mixed martial arts, like you are tuning into this fight. This fight's amazing. I'm super hyped up, and we're gonna get into it in a few seconds. But the rest of the card, man, is looking great. So I'm super, super excited for UFC 310.
Matt, unanimous?
100%. This fight to make. It's an incredible fight for the welterweight division, and it makes sense rankings wise. When we're coming off of a light heavyweight title fight where you saw the number 8 guy get a title shot, well, now you get the number 3 getting a title shot, and he's undefeated. Bilal Muhammad staying active. You love to see it, man. This is a fantastic matchup. Like Danny said, it's a hardcore fight, and it's a hardcore card up to top to bottom as well. But it's going to be one of the most entertaining cards of the year, in my opinion.
And what's your early lean here?
As far as the
Muhammad and Rakhmonov fight.
As far as the outcome, man. This is a tough fight to pick.
Bruh.
It is so hard to pick. Like, I'm gonna be flipping coins up until it's time to submit our staff picks for sure. But man, I early lean, considering the run he's on right now, man, it's hard to pick against Bilal. It really is.
I'm with you, Danny.
Look at his face.
One.
Well, the
I
other
like
guy's
Shavkat,
undefeated,
man.
and
I
he's
like
finished
Shavkat.
every
I
fight.
think he can. I think Bilal's probably all around the better fighter, technically speaking. I think if they were to spar, we'd probably see Bilal beat him most of the time. But this is a fight. I feel like Shavkat, when it comes down to fighting, getting violent, getting nasty, he is a little bit better than that at Bilal. So I expect this to be a very, very close fight. But that violence factor got to add up some points. So I'm going to go with Shavkat. But we'll see in a few weeks what I'm thinking, because I feel like I'm probably going to go back and forth in this one.
Danny, if I had 2 tickets to the World Cup final and Colombia's in it, but I told you the only way you
World
can go
Cup
is if
final
you
with
pick
Colombia.
the right winner of that fight. You're really going to go with Rakhmonov against the tear that Muhammad's been in after what he did to Edwards in England?
Well, I thought you were going to make me choose between that and something else. No, yeah. If I'm choosing life or watching Colombia
He's playing the
Final
South
World
Florida
Cup,
card,
I'm choosing
guys.
life.
He just wants
I'm
to go
sorry,
to
choosing
the
Colombia
gym
playing the
later on
Final
and
World
get an
Cup.
interview with
In
Rakhmonov.
terms of, yeah, I'm going to go with Rakhmonov for now. Yeah, man. The dude's a killer, undefeated. He's faced all kinds of styles so far and looked great. Bilal's a badass again, but like if I had to pick, dude, I'm gonna go with Shavkat. He wears dead animals on his head and he sits on thrones. Like, how can you not go for?
Did you not see Bilal Muhammad
with
in
Sha-
that
with
elevator,
Shavkat.
mad dogging all 5 of Edwards' team and Edwards? He has no fear. He's a beast.
I know he's a beast, but like, Shavkat literally wears beasts. So I'm gonna go with Shavkat.
True. Hey, I'm curious, George.
Yeah.
Underneath your hat, you still have hair, right? And Danny still has a mustache, as far as I'm concerned. I know from time to time when you guys disagree on things, one of them's got to go, right?
Bald versus mustache bet for Rakhmonov and
See,
Muhammad.
I don't feel too confident about my Rakhmonov pick for me to put my mustache on the line. So I'll put my mustache on the line for UFC 308.
Topuria
You
and
said Holloway, no?
I did say Holloway, but I'm not as sure. I'm not as sure on Holloway as I am on Muhammad. Let me think about it, but I'm not saying no.
Okay.
Danny, the mustache means more than Colombia in the World Cup? That's a
Well,
bold
no,
statement.
that's if I had to pick, then I'm gonna pick Rakhmonov. But if that same prize was on the line, I'd rather choose the main event of UFC 308 than the main event of UFC 310. I feel more comfortable picking Ilia than I do Shavkat.
What's your early lean goes?
It's hard to go against Bilal Muhammad right now. I understand where Danny's coming from. and
Damn,
I feel
no
I
love
feel-
for Shavkat.
I feel the same things he does. It's just Bilal hasn't really done anything to make me think he's that
He
that
just
same
ripped
Bilal.
apart
And the
Edwards'
improvement from
knee.
fight to fight, um, I just can't go against him right now. But I understand why Danny's on Shavkat, and I trust me, part of me wants to do that as well.
Shafkat
Go
is
right in the
18
fence,
and
baby.
0 and has finished everybody.
Who are his most recent wins? Burns and who else?
No, he
Wonderboy.
never fought Burns.
Oh, sorry.
He
Who?
finished Wonderboy Thompson last December. Okay, there's going to be a
He's
year
aging,
layoff.
man. He's aging.
Jeff Neal Magny. Yes, the
You see what
level
I'm
of
saying?
opposition is not nearly
Right.
as equal as Bilal. But like, you also got to look at the way he's doing it. It's not just. It's the same thing with Kayla Harrison. Like, she was kicking a lot of ass in PFL, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, who is she fighting?" But it's beyond that. Like, you have to see what she's doing to those ladies, and clearly, by her last two performances in the UFC, I think she proved that she's one of the best in the world, if not the best, in my opinion, the best.
See, I think Edwards is pretty legit, actually. I'm not throwing shade at him. So that's why I'm really amazed at how Bilal ran through him. Honestly, I'm like, whoa. I mean, and he ticked a lot of boxes. He's oozing confidence. He wants to stay busy, and he's playing. You know, he got enough rest from that fight to now turn it around in December. So he's not rushing into anything like how Sterling had to do within 3 months he had to fight another guy and he wasn't ready for it. It just seems like I don't know, man. I really like his swag. But I think the world of Rakhmonov, I get it, but I just think that Bilal's just been fighting stiff competition
Yes.
and doing well against it.
Whose resume at this point weighs more? Bilal's, for sure.
Yeah, there's also a couple other things in Bilal's favor as well. Joseph Boza in the chat called it out a second ago. He said he didn't think Shavkat has been scheduled for 25 minutes. He has not in the UFC. He has outside of the UFC. But along those lines, when has Shavkat fought somebody that can really drag a fight out all of those 25 minutes like this? You know, Bilal's that type of guy. Bilal's that type of guy that will be in your face for 25 minutes to grind you against the cage, you know, wrestle the hell out of you if he has to. So it's a different type of fighter that he's faced. You know, he's coming off fights against strikers, you know, Wonderboy, Jeff Neal Magny, you know, Carlston Harris. These are all guys that it's a completely different game plan that he's got to deal with. And like we've all kind of said, Bilal on this run that he's on right now, man, like there's a lot of things that Shavkat has not had to deal with yet.
That is true. You guys are maybe starting to convert me here to a Bilal pick.
All right, there's another title fight that was announced. Alexander Pantoja versus Kaya Sakura, who comes over from Ryzen. He's been signed as a free agent. He goes straight into a title shot. And look, I'm not hating on that. I just wish they wouldn't have announced that before Royval versus Tyra. Why? Because I thought Tyra would be next if he were to beat Royval. And if he did something amazing, I thought it'd be a slam dunk, hanging on the rim type next of a call. But it worked out for the UFC. Tyra came up short, and so we have this. But I've always liked the fighter to come in, get the introduction. Maybe you give him a layup or you give him a winnable fight, and then boom, you move on from there. But he got ushered to the front of the line. Are you guys feeling this, Matt?
I am feeling it. I'm feeling it for a few reasons. One, so let's think back. You know, the flyweight division was nearly axed from the UFC, right? Why? Because it wasn't considered exciting. Not a lot of people watched it, yada, yada, whatever have you. Now we know that's far from the truth. The most exciting fights come from this division consistently now, right? But now you have Kaya Sakura coming in, a guy who brings numbers with him. He has a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. He has 500,000 people on his Instagram following him. He is a popular dude. So he has the opportunity to come in here and be a superstar right off the bat. And that's something that I'm really intrigued by. You know, you look at his resume, he's fought some tough names in Ryzen. Excuse me. So he has an opportunity to come over here and really, you know, shock the world and really build himself into a massive star right out of the gate, which is something that, you know, when can you say that about the flyweight division ever? Someone being a massive star, you know, immediately. That's a big thing, and I'm glad the UFC capitalized on that opportunity here in this spot. I think the fight has a potential to be a fight of the year candidate. Obviously, we'll see how it goes. There are some unknowns for Kai as well. Having to make 125, having to deal with the rule set of no soccer kicks, no knees to the ground, that kind of stuff. So there's some things working against him as well. But man, when you consider the popularity, He's a fantastic fit for this fight. And not to mention, another thing that I think is pretty interesting, this is kind of the closest that we're going to get to a cross-promotional fight in the UFC now, considering he's coming straight into a title fight after leaving Ryzen. So it's a fantastic thing that they're doing here, I think.
Man, I'm shocked that you thought all this. I mean, you brought up some good points. So you definitely supported your argument. But would you have felt this strongly even if Tyra had won and absolutely blitzed Royval?
I mean, we would have a different argument, right? Because you'd be like, okay, now we're talking about, okay, who's next up? Because
you know how there's the whole merit thing. I mean, obviously,
the merit thing is there for sure. I think he would be the solid next guy up, you know. But they decided to announce it. But like I said, I think you announce it because of the popularity that Kai is bringing to the cage, man.
Goes, you feeling that?
I think as long as it doesn't happen on the regular, I think it's okay to do this every now and again. You just can't abuse it. But, you know, you guys bring up good points. I mean, look at Kayla Harrison, right? And what she's had to do to get to her potential title shot. The division kind of needs fresh blood. And like Matt said, it does kind of make it fun. You do feel like it's Ryzen versus UFC. As long as you don't do it on the regular, you do it every now and again, I'm okay with it.
Danny?
I don't like it. I completely disagree with both these guys. Bro, like the guy, okay, yeah, he's popular over in Japan, Ryzen champion. He's beaten some solid guys, great record, veteran. But he needs one fight at least to kind of showcase and present himself to the American and UFC audience. And look, I think at this point, like Daida, if he would have won, like he would have been obviously the clear one, and it would have been a disrespect to skip him over with Kai. But at this point, like you still got Amir Abbasi. If he wins and beats Brandon Moreno, I think he's 100% deserving. Obviously, that puts the UFC in a bit of a tight spot because that's in November and this pay-per-view is in December. So I get it, but I don't know. I always feel a little bit weird when somebody arrives to the UFC and gets a title shot immediately. I do think they need one fight to prove themselves. And also, I want to point this out. I believe Kai hasn't made flyweight since like 2016 or something like that. Remember, he was fighting Juan Archuleta, Kyoji Horiguchi, all these fights at 135. The most recent weight he made was like 130, and that was like several years ago, like pre-pandemic. So yeah, we also don't know what he's gonna look like. And plus, he's got to travel now all the way to Vegas. I don't know. I would like to see him make the weight first in a regular fight before shoving him in a 25-minute fight in a weight class that he hasn't made in years. So, yeah.
I feel like this is one of those times that I was talking about where it's a business decision, where it's UFC thinking as a business. Because you're right, come in, get one fight, and then possibly. But I think maybe it's their way of saying, we're not sure if we can make one fight. We need to cash it in now.
Wouldn't the same apply to Harrison? She might come in even more shredded, and she's had to make 135 twice. Or, she made 136, right, guys? I think on both. Or
both times.
Yeah. I don't know. All right, I guess we always get over it. We make the announcement, react, and we get over it. I do want to move on, but I want to reward the chat. They've been hanging in there, and there's some good stuff. First of all, M24, welcome back, guys. Sounds like he's a fan of the show. He listens in a lot. Mark England has a good one, so make it quick. Goes, let's go to you. Hooker versus McGregor. Seriously, are you feeling it? You know, they kind of had something going on in Spain. Chandler says he wanted him next, but just real quick on that one. Real quick.
Nah, I'm not really feeling it. And I don't really think we'll see Conor McGregor. So every time I hear it, it's just kind of like, eh.
All right. Steve Williams says the best part of Monday, SBC. He loves it, and I'll get to some more in just a second. But, guys, we got to talk about PFL. PFL this weekend has Battle of the Giants. It's a pay-per-view. In North America, you can watch it on DAZN or ESPN Plus, and all over the world, you can watch it on DAZN. And Goes and I will be doing a watch along, and the exclusive prelims will be on MMA Junkie. So hang out with us, watch those early fights with us, including one of our favorite fighters to watch fight and actually talk. Raytheon Stotts, he's fighting. He was recent guest of ours on MMA Junkie Radio. So you hang out with us for those prelims, then you got a decision to make. You get that pay-per-view, which I think you should because it's got some great fights. We're going to talk about them right now. You know, you can enjoy them, and if not, you can stay with us. We'll be your eyes and ears. So I go to the panel now. Do you feel the buzz for this event? Because arguably, baddest man on the planet, baddest woman on the planet, PFL may actually house those fighters. Danny, your thoughts?
Not yet, but I've noticed that's a bit of a trend now in just this era. Like it's really hard to get excited for something that's like just really far out. I feel like we get excited once it's really here. And this is fight week, right? Today's the official day of fight week. So I think along the next few days, I think I'll start feeling the buzz a bit more. But for now, it doesn't feel as big as it should be. But I know with some of the promos that I've seen, the quality of the promotion has been great. So I expect that to ramp up over the next few days. So so far, not so much, but I'm not too worried about it.
Matt Wells, someone is going to be removed from consciousness in that main event, possibly even the co-main event, man. Them chicks are badass as well. How about you? Are you feeling it? Are you amped up for this event? This is PFL's arguably biggest event maybe ever, and that includes all those title fights that they've had over the years.
Yeah, it's a big event. I'm not sure if the buzz is quite there yet, like Danny said, simply because the MMA schedule is so hectic these days. But man, I think once we, hit Friday, once the weigh-ins are here, maybe around press conference or whatever, weigh-ins for sure. I think people will start getting a little bit more excited because the return of Francis Ngannou to MMA is a big thing. The return of Chris Cyborg to MMA is a big thing. And man, those are two fantastic matchups that they have. And I mean, even if you're just tuning in for just those two fights, those are you can't really make better matchups these days, especially outside of the UFC. So I am personally super excited for this card and for some of the other matchups on the undercard as well. But like I said, it's hard to make matchups better than this outside of the UFC these days in MMA.
Calhoun in the chat says this pay-per-view is going to bomb big time. Chris Goes Wild says, hell yeah, lineal MMA heavyweight title fight. Joseph Boza said, PFL's grasping at straws. I haven't seen no promotion on ESPN for this card. Scott Christian says, this is a great card. If these people were in the UFC, it would sell. And Chris Goes Wild says, I will absolutely watch Francis Ngannou fight. That's pretty split there in our chat. How about you? I mean, I know you're calling the fights with me or we're doing the watch along, but are you amped up? Are you feeling it? Did PFL earn your $44?
They did. Part of it is that price line, right? It's just way cheaper than some of the other things we've had to pay for. I'm totally down with it. But I mean, when you ask yourself, like Francis Ngannou, Chris Cyborg, when do they ever give you a stinker? Like, I mean, Francis has had maybe one bad fight, but overall, that is just carnage, dude. I totally love that. And there are some fights on the undercard that are kind of getting passed over. So overall, I'm down. Totally. I totally. How do you not want to watch who people consider is the baddest man on the planet in Francis Ngannou? I'm down.
Man, there's some haters in the chat. West Coast says nothing exciting about PFL. Didn't we just have UFC 301 in Rio de Janeiro with Pantoja versus Urseg at the top? No disrespect to those guys, right?
I paid $70 for that. $80 for that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and like this is like the size of these guys' fists colliding. I don't know how I don't know. I just think that's throwing shade for no reason at all. I think PFL definitely came through here. So hopefully we turn some people this week, right? I don't know. How important is this event for the promotion goes?
Very important because, considering now with Bellator sort of fading away, the PFL has a huge spotlight on them right now as trying to be that clear number two. Give us that alternative to the UFC that we're constantly talking about. They need to turn out a good card. They need to have exciting fights. I think on paper, they've done a tremendous job. I think the card overall is very exciting, but there is a lot on the line. And as George mentioned earlier, we could be talking about the baddest man on the planet, the baddest woman on the planet. So yeah, there is a lot on the line for the PFL on this card.
Danny, what's the best possible outcome in the main event for the PFL? Business-wise, everything.
There's such a tricky spot because if Renan Ferreira goes out there and just gets stretched, which totally could happen, it's like, I'm not saying it signals like a different tier between like the UFC fighters and the PFL level, because we've seen some PFL fighters defeat UFC guys that have come over, but still it does kind of, I don't know, it does kind of put down a little bit of the PFL original product. Francis Ngannou is not an original PFL product. But at the same time, if he wins, like Francis Ngannou is a big star. People know him. I mean, we see here on the chat, Don Vito saying that he's never watched PFL, but this weekend he will, just because of Ngannou. So having him win, plus he's got connections with the boxing world, which he's talked about often. Yeah, I think that'll be big. I think the best outcome is probably a competitive fight to kind of bring up Ferreira, but then in the end have Ngannou win so he maintains that status. And we could be talking about after Saturday, who is the best heavyweight on the planet? Does PFL or the UFC have the baddest man on the planet? I think that'll be very interesting conversation. So probably Ngannou winning, but in a way that makes Ferreira look good at the same time.
Chris Goes Wild's also saying AJ McKee is on the card. Yep, I like that guy as well. Plato. What's that? A portly philosopher? He is saying, he's saying I'd watch Francis anywhere. Me too. Don't worry about it. I'm portly as well. Matt, is he still the most terrifying human on the planet? Is he the baddest man on the planet going into this fight? He hasn't fought in 2.5 years in MMA.
Francis, yeah, absolutely is. I mean, you got to think, like, especially for the PFL side of things, right, that they want him to win here so they can have that feather in the cap. Like, hey, we have the baddest man on the planet. And he has been the baddest man on the planet, you know. That way you can keep that talk going, you know, in interviews. If you're a Don Davis, you can get on the mic and still say things about John Jones in the UFC and, you know, ducking a cross-promotional fight and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff goes away if Francis loses. So you need him to win here. You need him to look good here. Coming in, I will agree that he is still the baddest man because he never lost in the octagon or never lost that title, so to speak, in the cage. He lost in the boxing ring, a completely different sport. Even then, he still went over and put Tyson Fury on his ass and arguably could have won that fight, should have won that fight. You know, obviously we know what happened in the Anthony Joshua fight, but unless if you're just being super cynical and you're taking away some of his shine for what happened in those boxing fights, that's something I think you can argue. But as far as MMA goes, he's still the guy, in the heavyweight division.
It's kind of how I feel as well. And if he wins, I think no matter what happens between Miocic and Jones, he's the guy where if they go in the room and only one guy comes out, I still think it's Ngannou, man. But we'll see. And let's give Ferreira an honest shot at winning because he's won the 2023 season. He defeated the Bellator champ quickly, too, in Ryan Bader. And now if he were to beat the last lineal champ of the UFC or whatever it's called, then that's a lot of feathers in that big man's cap, you know. So we got to give him his respect there. But I'm really, really pumped up for this main event. It's Monday, and I'm already pumped. I wish the fight was happening tonight. Prediction time. Danny, which way are you leaning?
I'm going to go Ngannou, but don't sleep on Ferreira. I haven't seen the odds yet, but if they're very lopsided and they're giving Ngannou a lot of praise because of his UFC run, you know, maybe going with Ferreira betting-wise is not a bad idea, but going with Ngannou in this one.
Goes?
I feel like there's a lot on Francis Ngannou's plate right now. You know, coming back to this sport at this high level, the timing, the training is all different. Not to mention some of the personal issues that he's had to endure. It's a lot to get through. I think he gets it done, but I don't think it's going to be easy.
I found the odds, guys. Ngannou's in the minus 325 to 350 range. Ferreira comes back up around plus 260-ish. Matt Wells, which way you leaning?
I'm going with Ngannou, man. Going with Ngannou until I see that man lose and get put out in the cage. Yeah, it's hard to bet against him, man. It's hard to bet against him.
And we just had Juliana Pena win her title back after 2 years off. I mean, I didn't think she won.
Did she, though?
At least...
Did we?
Did she, though?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't think she did, but she fought close enough that at least 2 judges thought she did.
Yeah.
That was funny. You guys just pushed back on that one. All right, guys. How about the baddest woman on the planet? Nunes is retired, right? And she hasn't fought in over a year. So I think we all feel like it is Chris Cyborg because of that face-off or that head-to-head that they had where Nunes knocked her out about 5 years ago. But, you know, Cyborg has continued to just win and win and win. And I think she's got 7 in a row since then. And let's not forget, Nunes lost to Pena at one point. Cyborg can say, I've only lost twice. My first fight ever. And to Nunes, who's considered the GOAT. Other than that, I've waxed everywhere I've gone. Strikeforce, Bellator, Invicta, UFC. and now possibly PFL. I mean, that's a belt collector right now. You know, that's a belt collector if I've ever seen it, with title defenses, by the way, multiple title defenses at all those. So I think she's the baddest woman on the planet right now, but she's facing a monster in Larissa Pacheco. And you guys are going to be shocked when I tell you this. Pacheco's a favorite. Can you believe that? Matt, which way? What do you think of this fight? Is it as quality as it gets for women's MMA?
Yeah, it 100% is. It's again, like, especially outside of the UFC. Build me a better fight than this outside of the UFC. You can't. It's a huge fight for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Chris Cyborg's coming back to MMA after her stint in boxing with questionable opponents, but she's back to MMA. I think this is a big spot for Pacheco. Obviously, she's coming in as the slight favorite, and you got to go out there and really prove that you are one of the most scariest female fighters in the world right now, like she has shown in her recent PFL fights. If she can do that against Chris Cyborg now, man, that's a huge feather in her cap. And not only in her cap, but kind of like as I was saying a minute ago about Ngannou having something for PFL to throw back at the UFC, they could do that with Pacheco here and with the Kayla Harrison thing, like they've already kind of done. But it would be a big spot for Pacheco to get a win here over Cyborg, and I think she's very capable of doing it. I mean, let's be honest, Chris Cyborg's not getting any younger, even though she is still super dangerous.
Danny, is this the biggest women's fight of 2024? So that includes everything that's happened, including what we just saw at Noche UFC, kind of a trilogy was somewhat settled a little bit. It's 1-1 and 1 to be fair. Zhang Weili, destructive earlier in the year against her Chinese compatriot. And then even the potential of a Nunes-Harrison fight. Is this one the biggest fight of the year?
I think on paper, no. I would put Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso as number one of 2024, just because, it's Valentina Shevchenko. She's one of the greatest of all time. And they were 1-on-1, big trilogy, et cetera, et cetera. Cyborg and Pacheco don't really have much history, but we already know how the Valentina Shevchenko and Grasso fight shaked out, which was a fairly boring fight. I don't expect this to be boring. So I think looking back, it will probably be, given the fact that I think we'll see probably a spectacular finish either way here. So, but that first has to happen. So on paper, no, but looking back, I think it'll probably be the biggest fight in women's MMA as far as like what stands out in the calendar.
Goes, you agree?
I'm on the fence on this one. I do feel like Cyborg Pacheco is the biggest fight that could be put together right now. So yeah, I think a lot of I agree with Danny. I think maybe the fact that it was Noche and it was in a sphere maybe helped out a little bit too. But I do feel like this is the biggest one right here.
I think so too, and just by a whisker, not by much. I don't think it's enough to argue over it or anything like that, because I was pumped up about the other one happening on Mexican Independence Day weekend, and the historical sphere card, where it may only be, a once in a lifetime thing, and I think both ladies are exciting, but yeah, look, I can't take it out of my head that the fight was kind of a dud. So, and Shevchenko was, she fought awesome that night. I think Grasso just was deer in the headlights or something. I don't know what happened there. All right. How about this whole thing with Kayla Harrison not being there? Kind of almost missing, like the timing, right? Missing out. I mean, is she or isn't she? I don't know, because she's got a huge platform now with the UFC. She's being a former champion in Holly Holm, a respected top 5, top 10 fighter in Ketlin Vera, right? And now she's probably looking at a title fight and maybe even drawing in former teammate and possible now future rival Amanda Nunes. But big stuff's happening at the PFL in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, against these two ladies who one of them she has history with, by the way. She gave her only loss in Larissa Pacheco. What do you think, Danny? Is she kind of missing a missing piece here for PFL?
Yeah, she kind of does, and it would have been such a huge get for PFL to keep her around, and kind of sad in a way that she didn't stick around for a little bit longer. She's doing great stuff in the UFC, and there's great matchups for her, and I dub her already as a future champion. I think she's gonna win the belt eventually over in the UFC within the next year. But if I had to pick one fight to make, and let's forget about if we can bring back the clock and let's pretend that the Holly Holm fight hasn't happened, the Ketlen Vieira hasn't happened. If I could make one fight, I would make Kayla Harrison versus Chris Cyborg. I mean, there's been a tons of bad blood between them on social media. That fight's sort of been built up. I think that's probably the biggest fight you can make for Kayla Harrison right now. And we're not going to get it now that Kayla Harrison, jumped over to the UFC, and Chris Cyborg seems to be in the last bits of her career, and probably Kayla Harrison is not going to fight for too much longer as well, given that she's up there in age too. So, a little bit bummed out. Plus, the Larissa Pacheco. Larissa has really improved a ton in the last couple of years. She has a win now over her, so I would have liked to see maybe a little series out of that. It would have been nice to see those three sort of fight each other and see who comes out on top at women's 145. So, a little bit of a bummer, but still, this is a fantastic fight that we're going to get on Saturday.
Matt Wells, you're my homie every week when it comes to the rankings. We bounce things off of each other. Does the winner of this fight, Cyborg and Pacheco, Cyborg's our number one right now, pound for pound, but can Pacheco become the number one pound for pound fighter considering everything that's happening over at the UFC?
I think so. Especially if she goes out there and finishes Cyborg. I think that would be a pretty definitive statement right there. But yeah, it's a huge opportunity for her to really solidify herself as that big name in women's MMA. And man, there's so many people that follow Chris Cyborg's career. Like, Chris Cyborg has kind of crossed over in a way that not many women have. She draws a lot of interest from people that typically don't watch the sport. So if she can go out there and do that against her, man, that would be a big win, big feather in her cap.
It's gonna stew at Dana White if people throw that in his face that he doesn't have the baddest woman or baddest man on the planet, and they both fought for him at one point. It's not like Fedor, right? He was out there and we just couldn't get him. I think he's gonna stew over that one for sure. But we got to get to it. And on Saturday is the event at 4 p.m. Eastern for that main card. But Goz and I will be on early in the morning with the exclusive prelims on MMA Junkie. Hopefully you guys tune in and check it out. We'll also be joined by a few fighters who can hang out with us as well. So the fights can only be seen on MMA Junkie on the prelims. And then you got a decision to make. If you get that pay-per-view, great. Let's watch it together. That's why it's a watch along. And if you don't, we'll be your eyes and ears on Saturday. All right, so look out for that promotion on Junkie. We also have people on site for that, so you'll get the best coverage for that event here on MMA Junkie. Quick prediction, guys. Cyborg and Pacheco. Danny?
Going Cyborg.
Matt?
Going Pacheco.
Ooh, Goz, you're the tiebreaker.
I am going Cyborg, and I'm actually surprised that she's the underdog. What was the line again, George?
The odds were, they were right at the top here. I had them.
All right.
Where'd they go? Oh, here they go.
Cyborg
right
minus 140
Yeah.
to plus 115 according to BetMGM.
Yeah.
So it's really close. Minus 140 for Larissa Pacheco, plus 115 for Chris Cyborg. And there's another big fight on the card, a title fight, because those are their own title fights that will be defended, according to Peter Murray, CEO of MMA Junkie of PFL. And by the way, he clarified to us this isn't the $2 million payout for Hanan Fajeda. I was a little bummed out. He says he's going to take care of him, but this is not the $2 million payout. Remember, that was one of the things that Francis Ngannou wanted some love for his brothers and sisters, and he supposedly a $2 million payout was there for the taking for his. I don't know if he clarified his next opponent, but future opponent. It sounded like it, but I think by him telling us that it's not it, I don't know if it'll ever be it or what'll happen. But Johnny Emblin, is he the best middleweight in the world? He defends against Fabian Edwards. They're going to run it back. Matt, what are your thoughts here?
No, he's not the best middleweight in the world. And this is not the matchup to try to prove that either. So I think it's going to be another cakewalk for Johnny Emblin. No disrespect to Fabian Edwards. It's just a bad matchup for him.
The Edwards clan's not going to be too happy. I already said Bilal Muhammad ran through his brother, and now they hear this. They're not going to be too happy with us over there in Birmingham, England. Are you sure, Matt? He's 15-0, and the UFC's passing that belt around. No one's had traction in the last few years. You don't think it's Emblin, huh?
Yeah, I think, you got to consider the competition, man. Got to consider the competition. I think there's a solid 3 or 4 guys from the UFC, I would say, that is better than Johnny Eplen.
All right.
But that's still saying a lot, though, right? That's still saying he would be in the top 5 mix if he were to go over to the UFC today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
still a good thing.
Yeah. Danny Segura, AJ McKee's on this card as well.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a big name. Paul Hughes is supposedly a big name in Europe, but I really wanted like a Newsman or Magomedov. But your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the PFL is able to do with AJ McKee. I feel like in Bellator, like obviously he became champion. He did a lot of great things, but I don't know. You interview the guy and you just get sort of like a stardom feeling to him. He's got a bit of that it factor. He's cool. He's not afraid to trash talk. But I feel like he's yet to cross over really into like mainstream popularity. Wondering if he could do so with the PFL. So yeah, I mean, he's got to win this one in order for that to kind of be a further discussion down the line. But yeah, I'm excited to see him back in the cage and what he's able to do. If he wins, you got to make AJ McKee versus Nurmagomedov. That fight's got to happen, dude.
Yeah. If it did go, does he have you've covered a lot of McKee fights as a featherweight, but now as a lightweight? Can he beat Usman or Magomedov? If he beats Paul Hughes.
I feel like
think
out
he
of
can.
everybody on the roster, he's like the one who's got the best shot, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know what? Look, I'm wearing my Dodger jersey, so I'm gonna throw a curveball at you guys. But the names that we're throwing out, right? Nurmagomedov, McKee, Cyborg, Ngannou. I'm looking at this stadium right outside my window. If they did a PFL UFC matchup, bro, that would be pretty competitive considering some of the names that we're throwing out and the matchups that would come out of it.
Yep.
I'm not so sure I write UFC down as the winner that easily.
I'm not disagreeing, but I remember Dana White getting burned by Chuck Liddell. You know, it didn't go too well for him at Pride, and his brand took a hit. And then when they brought over Vanderlei Silva and Chuck Liddell, and they faced off, but yet the fight didn't happen back then, but it just looked like Pride got free promotion. He's just always been a sourpuss when it comes to that. It's all about the 3 letters, and you can't argue against what a juggernaut the UFC's become. But man, what I love to see all those matchups from some of the PFL's best players against the UFC's best players. You 3 have been great players today. Great job, fellas. Folks, don't forget, we have a PFL watch along on Saturday. Tune in with us. You'll see promotion throughout the week. And again, we have feet on the ground. We have a fabulous team out there that's going to be covering it for you, so you'll know everything that's going on. And again, arguably the baddest man and woman on the planet are fighting that night, going in and coming out of it. You know, it could be the other 2 as well, should they get wins over Cyborg and Ngannou. So it's pretty exciting times for the PFL Battle of the Giants. Tune in, and we're going to definitely unpack it on next week's Spinning Back Clique. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Go out and be a champion.